So we're back from holidays. So I hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend. I fortunately got to go down and visit some of my family without an agenda. So the last couple times that we've been able to go down was a lot of planning for the wedding. So this one was actually a really nice trip that we got to go and spend time with my family. That wasn't about a wedding. So that was nice. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend. Got to spend it with their family, friends, and all of those people that matter to you. So today's topic is building yourself up. So the reason I picked this is because if you don't know, growing up I was bullied a lot. And just a quick shout out, if you're a mom and you have a hard time hearing about it, it might be a little difficult. If you're my mom, you might want to not watch this one because she always gets really upset when she hears about it. So growing up, I was always really bullied, and it was always, I remember first memory being, I had glasses for the first time and everybody was pointing and laughing at me. And I remember people not wanting to be my friend, a lot of rumors going around that things about me, different kinds of things in elementary school, just kind of the way that kids can be cruel sometimes. And it was always really confusing to me. And then as I got a little older, it continued in different ways. I didn't make friends very easily. I remember when I was in 6th grade, I was picked up and dropped on my tailbone, which really hurt. Fortunately, I didn't break anything or bruise anything too bad. It was just kind of aching for a while. Kind of continuing on that in junior high, I had a rumor going around about me that I had slept with somebody else's, I think, husband, friend, something like that. And so nobody would talk to me for like 2 or 3 days. Just different things like that were continually bothering and poking me, and I didn't make a lot of friends. Then I got to college and it changed a little bit. It wasn't quite the same. It was a lot of, oh, I can't believe that you went through that. You're such a great person and you're so nice, or I really like you. I can't understand why people didn't want to be your friend. But at the same time that people were saying those sorts of things, I was also not getting invited to parties or not getting invited out when everybody got together and went to eat. And it just kind of built on that, my self-worth, because I felt like there was something wrong with me. I looked around and everybody else seemed to be able to make friends. I looked around and everybody else had all of these plans for the weekend, and they would out with friends, and they would go to the movies together, and they would go to eat together. But I was home. I was always home. I have a great relationship with my sisters. So we would always be home and like playing video games together and watching movies, and I would hang out with my family all the time. But I was never invited to go out places. And I remember in high school, I thought I'd had a good group of friends. But then I'd come back to school on Monday and they'd gone out together to go to eat at different restaurants, or they all hung out at somebody's house. I just wasn't invited. And so it kind of continued to trend that way. And it was really difficult for me to kind of build up my self-worth when every time I thought I'd built some sort of relationship with people, it crumbled down around me, and it always seemed to be either blaming me or telling people like different things that seemed to be my fault. And so that was really frustrating and difficult for me to kind of figure out and try not to build my self-worth on that. Fortunately, while I was in college, I had a job at a restaurant, and I met one of my best friends, who's still my best friend to this day. He and I used to hang out all the time. We always, he was starting college, and I had already been in college for maybe like a year or two. And so he was starting college, and we would hang out, and we would always go get lunch together, and we at some point started working out together, and we made plans, and I would go to his shows. And then through that, I made another friend who ended up being another one of my really great friends. She was actually the maid of honor at my wedding. And that helped a lot because it finally felt like it wasn't just my fault that I didn't make friends easily, and I started to build up some of my self-confidence. At the same time, though, it wasn't just a switch that flipped. it was, well, maybe they're just doing it because they feel sorry for me. Maybe it's just because, I don't know, that they're just playing a cruel joke on me. And the fact that they're still my friends to this day kind of disproves that, but it still creeps up on me every now and then that maybe they're not friends with me because they like me, because it's something else, or because they're trying to see, I don't know how long this goes on. And it's not true, because we're still really great friends and we hang out to this day. But I had already built up that insecurity and that experience that it was really difficult for me to outgrow it and to kind of figure out how to let that go and to push that aside, because it's not a healthy thing to do, to always question why people are trying to have relationships with you. And I also had to deal with it when I started dating my husband. When we first started going out, it just, I don't know, it didn't feel right, or I was worried that he'd get annoyed with me, and I annoyed him to the point about if he thought I was annoying. I would constantly ask, like, do you think I'm annoying? Do you think I'm annoying? And he always said, you're not, but you're annoying me by asking me if, if I think that you're annoying. And so it was something that I had to get over slowly, was accepting that it's not me. It's not always me. Yes, I can make mistakes. Yes, I will do things that irritate people, but it's not something that's wrong with me. It's just, it is, I'm different and I'm not everyone's cup of tea. But building up that confidence to be able to brush it off was a really difficult thing, because I didn't have any other experiences that kind of helped me develop that. I remember more recently I went to my parents' house and we were watching some home videos, and it's me, probably like 3 or 4, and my little sister sitting at the table, and we're all talking, and my mom, apparently my birthday's coming up, and my mom says, yeah, your birthday's coming up, we're gonna have a party. And she's, I'm gonna have a party? And I say, is everybody gonna come to my party, Mom? And she goes, yeah. And I just started bawling watching this video, and my mom's like, why are you crying? Everybody did come. And I was like, yeah, but it struck a chord with me, because I remember as I got older, I would try to have parties or try to have get-togethers where I would have friends come over and nobody showed up. And more recently I had a party and nobody showed up. And it's gotten a little bit easier to kind of cope with this. It's gotten a little bit easier to kind of grow from this and push it aside and let it go. But it's still really difficult for me. And I've not always known how to deal with it. And more recently, as I've gotten older, as I've learned different coping mechanisms and different ways to kind of help build myself up, I've just learned that I have to be okay with who I am. I have to learn to accept people's compliments on my personality or my skills, and brush aside a lot of the negative that comes with it. Now, that's not to say not to take anybody's criticism or feedback and try to improve myself. It's just, don't let that change how you think of yourself. Don't let that make you think, well, now I'm not good enough. Now I'm not worth it. Now maybe somebody treated me that way because I wasn't good enough. Maybe I deserved that. Because nobody ever deserves to feel the way I was made to feel, the way a lot of people are made to feel. It's one of the reasons why I feel so passionately about the whole bullying problem right now, because it destroys what you feel about yourself. And it was easy for me to kind of justify it away, like, well, maybe they just had a terrible home life, or maybe they're just really frustrated with themselves. And growing up, my mom always said I was always very aware and knew who I was. I never really had to question the kind of person that I was. I knew a lot of the things that I know about myself today. I knew about myself when I was in junior high and high school. I've grown up. I've kind of, everybody grows up and develops new traits and becomes from an angsty teenager to an adult, sometimes still angsty. But she always said, it's because they're jealous of you, or because you're really pretty, or because you're really smart. And it was hard for me to hear that a lot of the time, just because I always thought everybody else was really pretty too. I always thought everybody else was really smart, and I have never been the kind of person to kind of retaliate. And it really frustrated my mother, because I remember coming home and she'd always tell me things like, just please hit one kid, and they'll leave you alone, and everybody else will learn not to pick on you because you'll fight back. But I didn't want to add to somebody else's problem. If they were picking on me because they were either being picked on at home, or they didn't think very highly of themselves because of things they'd been told, I didn't want to add to that. If nothing else, I wanted to be the one person who still was nice to them, who was still kind person to them, and didn't think any less of them per se. And it held through for the most part up until about high school. I started to fight back a little bit, and it didn't really get any better. It just, people left me alone, which wasn't the result I necessarily wanted, because I still wanted friends, but it did help a little bit in that I wasn't quite as bullied as I used to be. So slowly but surely I started to figure out what was going to work for me. And a lot of the time I tried to tell myself as I got older, as I finished college, as I was in the workforce, that it would end, because we weren't in high school anymore, we're not kids anymore, we're all adults and professionals. But I found that it still happens. Even in the workplace, you'll get picked on, people will talk bad about you, whether or not it's anything that you did, and you have to learn to take everything with a grain of salt so that you can continue to build yourself up. Because more recently, I was told by somebody who I thought very highly of and who I trusted that I was failing in my position. And while this was a while ago, I still feel it. I heard it and I took it in, and I wasn't sure what to do next. I could feel that hurt, that confusion, because I've always been of the belief that you give 110% of your effort every time, all the time, because you want to make sure that your work speaks for itself. And hearing that somebody thought that I didn't do a good job, or that I was slacking, or that I wasn't putting enough effort, or I was trying to get away with not doing my job, and that really hurt, because it was one of the few things that I'd always taken a lot of pride in. Even when I was a waitress, I was always giving 110%. I remember I had a manager come over and was like, "Why are you just standing around?" And I said, "Well, I've literally finished everything that I could possibly think to do right now, and there wasn't that many tables because it was a slow day." And they're like, "Well, did you clean the light switch out from all the sauce that gets splattered on it?" And I had. And they picked through all of the server area that we're supposed to keep clean, and it was clean, and they were just like, "Okay, well, try to look busy," and then left. And so that is the level of work that I have always strived to obtain. And so hearing this from someone who I thought very highly of hurt. And while I tried not to take it personally, and I tried to take it with a grain of salt and kind of move on, it wasn't a random person, and that probably would have been a little bit easier to take in. So it still kind of bothers me. It still kind of whispers in the back of my mind that you didn't do a good job and you weren't doing good enough. But I've learned to take in the good and try to push out the bad. So my husband said, you know what you did. Do you remember all of the work you put in? Do you remember think about all of the things that you did? Do you still think it's true? And that helped so much more than I thought it was going to, because it wasn't an immediate thing. It was a more over time thing. And I've learned to apply that to everything now. It's, okay, if somebody tells you you're not very pretty, and that is important to you, then you step back and say, okay, well, do you think you're very pretty? If you look in the mirror, can you find things that you find attractive in yourself? Have other people told you that you were very attractive? And that kind of helps take away some of the sting of it, at least. And the same thing, well, you're not very smart. It's like, well, I got good grades in school, and I've always put in a lot of effort, and I've always been complimented on how smart I am, so obviously it's not true. Or, all of the little things that people tell you and try to tear you down in different ways, whether because they're trying to be cruel or whether because they just need to say this to get something else that they want and they're not taking you into consideration. If you take the time to step back and actually prove it to yourself, a lot of the times there's no proof there. Oh, you're not good enough. Okay, well, I have this whole other list of people who think I'm good enough. I have my friends now who still hang out with me, and who, if I tell them that, somebody said something mean to me today, they'll immediately all pile up and gang up and say, do I have to beat someone up for you? Do I have to go and have your back? And so obviously I must be good enough. Maybe not for everyone, but I am good enough. And it can be easy sometimes, especially when you start to fall into a little dark hole and beat yourself up with, well, another person said I wasn't good enough, and you keep piling on all of the other people who've ever said anything like that. It can feel like it's true, but it's not. You are good enough. A few years ago when I was in high school, I did sorry, my cat's playing with the curtains. A few years ago when I was in high school, I helped put together a Teen Acts retreat. And I gave a speech who, to this day, people still bring up to me and how much of a difference it made to them. And the whole topic was perfect. The definition of perfect is fitting an exact situation or need. You are perfect because God does not make mistakes. You might not know what your need is. A lot of tools don't know what their needs are. A lot of artists and scientists from years ago were considered crazy and untalented. One of my favorite artists, Vincent van Gogh, was in and out of psych wards and was considered a terrible artist. And to this day, we pull up his pictures and consider him one of the greats. You don't need to see that you're perfect all the time. You don't need to, know always what your purpose is, but you're fitting it. Because if you look back, a lot of the times, some things that happened would not have happened without you. If I hadn't given that speech or had gone through all of those dark times when I was younger and struggled with depression and anxiety and not feeling loved or accepted, I wouldn't have been able to give that powerful speech. And I wouldn't have been able to touch all the people who came up to me afterwards and said, that was amazing. I wouldn't have been able to meet my husband. I wouldn't have met all of the people that I've met so far who have told me that I changed their lives, even if it was just, I bought them food today. Just because someone says that you're not worth it, or you're not perfect, or you're not this, or you're not that, doesn't make it true. You are perfect, you are worth it, and you are always enough. Hopefully this helped some of you. If nothing else, maybe a couple of years later you'll think of this and it'll be what helps you out, the way all of the things that everybody who's ever loved me said things to me, and it didn't quite click until a while later. So, thanks for listening.